One of the questions I'm often asked is how I got into photojournalism. I always had a passion for photography, and I used to take pictures growing up around me, anything that I would find interesting. But it was my thesis year at college when I really realized what photojournalism was. I was doing my thesis on the role of media in the facilitation of Sikh tourism, and I wanted it to be an amalgamation of photos and text. Beena Sarwar, who is the editor of The News, stumbled upon my photos on Facebook and she asked me if she could publish them on Aman Ki Asha, which is a section in The News promoting peace between India and Pakistan. And that was the first time I ever got published, and I decided this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. The following year, I moved to the US for my master's in journalism, but my heart was set that I want to branch out and do photojournalism. I had been saving up for 2 years to buy my first full-frame DSLR, and as soon as I got it, the riots in Ferguson began, when an unarmed black teenager, Michael Brown, was fatally shot by a white police officer. And this was the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement. And one of my mentors, I remember him saying to me while we were covering a protest in Chicago that you've come to America at a very interesting time. There were several challenges while I shot photos in Ferguson. Safety was the biggest one. Apart from being tear-gassed, me and other photographers were constantly surrounded by heavy gunshots. But this is also when I realized how supportive the photojournalism community was. I was given a helmet, a gas mask, a bulletproof vest, all by my photographer friends. That's another story that when the time came, the first round of tear gas, I wasn't able to put the gas mask on because my hair was too big and my face was too small. And a Chicago Tribune photographer pulled me into the alley and he tried to fix it for me and it just wasn't happening, so we decided to run in the opposite direction. On that night, a group of photographers decided to stick together while we went out and took pictures of the buildings that were ablaze. This was a very dangerous neighborhood, and the rule was that we couldn't move away 10 feet away from each other because we wanted to stick together and we wanted to just be in and out of there. I also realized the importance of social media because I was using the built-in Wi-Fi on my camera while hiding at a bus stop, and I was transmitting photos from the scenes. And those were the first photos that were coming out from that night. And the Huffington Post immediately got in touch with me, and they asked me if they could publish those photos. And I was a graduate student. And I was like, of course. This was the second time I was getting published in my life. And I remember my professor, Jackie Spinner, calling me and saying, you cannot afford to get arrested, otherwise forget about your master's. So when the police says back off, you back off. I was able to cover the US presidential campaign in 2016. Covering presidential campaigns is a lot of fun. The deadlines are intense, but the entire gang of photojournalists come together. I remember being at a Trump rally, and I was late, and the press line was really long, and by the time I got inside, the press section was full. The TV guys are always tall, and the cameras add even more to their height. So I couldn't find an angle where to stand from and where to shoot. And Scott Olson of Getty Images, a very senior wire photographer, just looked at me and my misery and offered me his step stool, which was kind of like a mini ladder. So I was able to get the shots that I wanted from that event. Wisconsin is known for its beer and cheese, and they take a lot of pride in that. And this lady I took a picture of was wearing a cheesehead hat. And as soon as I took a picture and I moved away, she started yelling at me that I'm going to sue you if you don't show me this picture. And I knew my rights. I knew that in America, you can take a picture of anybody as long as they're in a public space. So I kept moving away from her, and she kept yelling behind me, hey, you news lady. Also, during the presidential campaign, me and my newspaper were always worried whether I would receive the press credentials or not, because I had a very Muslim name. I always got it. I did a story in Madison, Wisconsin on Muslims in Madison, and I went around in the community and I asked people what they thought and what their sentiments were regarding the negative portrayal of Muslims in the media. All of them, of course, condemned the attacks, but they also said that the media never reaches out to them, and they never get to share their side of the story, and that it just paints everybody with the same stroke of brush. Pakistan and a few other countries are known to have acid attacks on women. But I wanted to find out what becomes of these women later on. What are they doing with their lives? What's happening to them later on? And I was able to find an acid attack survivor who was getting married for the second time. And I remember her saying to me, I thought I didn't have another chance at happiness. In remote villages of Chitral, it is almost impossible for women to buy sanitary pads because by the time the shopkeepers have added the transportation costs and the taxes, they become unaffordable for them. So there's a woman in Chitral who is making sanitary pads from her home, and she's selling them to the local women in her village. And women are walking 10 to 15 minutes to get to her house to buy them. In the recent elections in Pakistan, I was able to follow a few transgender candidates running in the elections. Nayab Ali was a candidate from Okara, and she was running for the National Assembly seat, and she's also an acid attack survivor. I took this photo at the Nadra office in Okara, and Sharmili is contemplating whether she should change her gender from male to gender X. She's worried that if she does that, in order to vote in the upcoming elections, she will never be able to go to Saudi Arabia to perform Hajj. When I moved to Pakistan, I was barely getting any photo assignments because my male editors over here don't like sending me to protests. However, I think I can handle it. But 2 weeks ago, my New York Times editor in Hong Kong sent me to cover the attacks on the Chinese consulate in Karachi. I remember being on the front line shooting with other men, and this police officer comes to me in plain clothes, and he started yelling at me, telling me to back off. And I said, why are you only telling me to back off? There are 20 other men standing right next to me. Why don't you tell them also? And he goes, because if something happens, you girls are going to be the first one to cry. I did not want to engage with him, but I really wanted to tell him that if I was the crying sort, I wouldn't have been here in the first place. I recently took these photos during the anti-encroachment drive that has polarized the country right now. It is heartbreaking to see already impoverished people losing little livelihood that they had. Most of the shopkeepers at Empress Market were selling commodities like soaps and spices and massage oils, and they're out of jobs now. I really enjoy working for UNICEF because I get to spend a lot of time with children, and they're always amused, very amused with my cameras, and they make cute and funny faces, and it's sometimes really sweet to see that most of them have never seen a DSLR camera in their life. Photojournalism is a big boys club everywhere in the world. But that doesn't mean that women shouldn't pick up cameras, come to the streets, and share important and vital stories. I miss my tribe of lady photojournalists. I miss working with them. I barely find any in Pakistan. It is a very tough industry for women to be in, especially in a country like Pakistan, working with herds of men, lugging around 10 to 15 kgs of gear, while also making sure that your dupatta is in place. But I want to see more women digging stories into a gold mine that is Pakistan, because there are so many important stories to tell, and oftentimes our male counterparts don't even get the access to tell those stories and share them. And we need more women to show up for that. Just like Woody Allen said, 80% of life is showing up. Thank you.